Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. So Sunday morning, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, went to the Governor General, the newly appointed Governor General, and asked for an election that's not supposed to be held for another 2 years. So we're now into a summer election in the middle of a pandemic where some people are saying we shouldn't have it, where other people are saying, look what's happening with wildfires. Other people are saying what's happening in Afghanistan. And so it's a real honor for me to check in with Tasha Kheiriddin, who is one of Canada's best known strategists, political analysts, and media commentators. She's a principal with Navigator Limited, Canada's leading high stakes advisory and communications firms. I'm so sorry about that. She's a national political columnist for the Post media chain of newspapers, where she writes weekly on political and current affairs issues. She lectures at Max Bell School of Public Policy at McGill University and serves as the vice president of the Canadian Centre for the Purpose of the Corporation. Very impressive young lady. What do you think? What's going to happen? Is it going to be majority government? That's what your website I looked into this morning says.
Well, that's what most people say. But honestly, Brian, I have no idea. I'd be lying to you if I said that we knew right now, the punditry class in general, and myself in particular, what the deal is going to be. Because there are so many wild cards here. Jagmeet Singh's performance in this election is going to be an issue. Quebec is going to be an issue in this election. The Green Party, are they going to completely melt down more than they already have? Where's their vote going to go? And the pandemic. So there are so many different elements here. Right now, a majority Liberal government is what most people predict, but that could disappear too.
So I also think that, Maxime Bernier and his party are going to take away some right-wing vote. And aren't we going to have a Wexit or something like that in the West that's going to compete in something like 42 or 44 seats that have been arguing that the bloc strategy is the right strategy, and that's going to take away some votes. So that's going to make the Conservative vote even more challenging, isn't it?
Well, the Conservative vote's going to potentially splinter off a bit to Maxime Bernier. We know that the last time around, he did actually impact a couple of ridings in particular. The margin of error was such that you could argue his party actually made the difference. And of course, when that happens, you get the Liberals, reaping the benefit of that, generally speaking. But I think here what you're going to see is not just the sort of the West coming through and the sort of the Wexit theme that you're putting forward, but I think the Conservatives are going to be hampered by the performance of Jason Kenney in the West and Doug Ford in Ontario in terms of the pandemic. The Liberals are going to try and conflate that and say, look, where you got Conservative governments, things don't go well. And, we would be the better option. Imagine if they had been in power federally, for example, or imagine if that's what the federal government had done as a Conservative government. So that's going to play there. I think there's a lot of anger in the West, though. The Conservatives, the challenge for them is they've got Alberta, right? And getting their vote out is very important in this election, but they can't really increase their share. Yes, will the Liberals, with Maxime Bernier, get the Liberals seats in Alberta? I doubt it. Maybe in Ontario, you could see that little splintering again, but I don't think it would affect the West as much.
But Wexit's going to win a couple of seats in Alberta, won't they?
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I think that at the end of the day, if people go the Wexit route with Max Bernier's party, I would be actually very surprised if that was actually successful. I think that what they are going to see, though, is the whole vaccine issue playing out and the way the pandemic's been handled. And, O'Toole's already gotten into hot water in terms of how he is treating a vaccine issue. He said that he would go for options as opposed to mandatory vaccination. Well, surprise, surprise, today the Liberals actually played that tune a little bit too. They changed their tone and said that could be an option in some cases. But I think that is the big thing. So if, seeing the Conservatives are going that way, it'll be hard for Maxime Bernier to play that card and say, look, we're the only ones, never mind Wexit, but we're the only ones who would be standing up for freedom of choice in this area.
So your company has got a really fascinating website that tracks some information about the election. And I was really surprised to see that Justin Trudeau has got a 43% positive impression rating, while Erin O'Toole only has a 22% positive impression rating. That's a massive difference.
It's a massive problem. It absolutely is. And you see that, in fact, all three of the other party leaders are tracking similar to Trudeau. Francois Blanchet, rather, is, I think, 42%. Jagmeet Singh is 41%. And then it drops off. So that is one of the biggest hurdles that Conservatives have. The hurdle is being known for Erin O'Toole. He's not as well known. This is his first rodeo in terms of an election. The other guys have already been around and had one under their belt. But yeah, and that feeds into the whole trust factor. You don't trust what you don't know. You don't like what you don't know. It's harder to do that. So I think that is something that he's got to earn. And that's, I think, why we've seen them get their platform out today really fast. They're trying to show the gravitas and give people something to trust.
I would have thought that his sort of I don't know rating would have been very high, given that people don't know him. But he's actually got a 46% negative rating. How do you get such a huge negative rating when people don't actually really know you?
Well, the way it's calculated, you're looking at the sort of a net trust score, is you subtract the trust from the people who don't trust you. So this is how you get to this actual negative rating. And Erin O'Toole's actually, I got him at 38, minus 38. So I don't know, you get the minus 46. You're making it worse for him than it already is. But net trust, we calculated, he's got a negative 38. Justin Trudeau's a negative 11. So, he's not trusted more than he's not trusted, if you want to look at it that way. He also has some hurdle. Jagmeet Singh is a negative 3, and Yves-François Blanchet, he's a winner at 9. And it's going to be interesting in Quebec because Yves-François Blanchet and Trudeau are really the two. They're going to go head to head in most places. The NDP is not really in the game, certainly not like it was under Jack Layton. And the Tories also are going to have a hard row to hoe. Some of their star candidates, they didn't run again. So it's going to really be a two-way race there. So Yves-François Blanchet he's a known quantity, he's a liked quantity, he's a trusted quantity. That's going to be a big challenge for the Prime Minister.
So the Prime Minister has been trying to get very close with the Quebec provincial government and has had some success in that regard, almost trying to prove that Quebec doesn't need the Bloc. They can trust the Liberals because they get along well with the government in power in Quebec. How's that been working out, do you think?
Well, yeah, that's definitely, you saw Justin Trudeau and François Legault all smiles this week, or last week rather, when they dealt with the childcare announcement. However, the Bloc is trying to spin it the other way. They're saying, look, we've managed to get things from the Liberals because we're there. We've managed to get them to amend the charter of the French language, but the Official Languages Act, to propose amendments that would really be helpful to Quebec. We managed to get them to protect our aluminum industry. We're there for you. So this is the old argument. The interesting thing is going to be of how they square that with the goal of independence. Because, I was talking on French radio this morning in Quebec City. The conversation is, well, okay, you want to make life better in Canada for French Canadians, but what happened to the independence stuff? And I think Trudeau's going to bring that out. If I were him in the debates, I think it would be smart for him to say, look, your real agenda is this. And that's not in Quebec's interest. Look how well it does in Canada with us in power, like you said. So I think that boogeyman of separation is going to come out again. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
So the big issue is obviously going to be the pandemic. How do you think Trudeau's done?
Well, my opinion might be different from yours. It's really different, I think, from a lot of voters. He gets a good rating. Most people think he's done okay. I look back and I think of things he should have done better. I look back at security at airports, screening and such, which was pretty non-existent at the beginning of the pandemic. You look back even recently, people coming in from, with the Delta variant that came to Canada, people getting off flights and not being screened. Then you had the whole hotel quarantine thing that basically was abandoned. That was a bit of a debacle. So I feel that piece was really not handled well, keeping the virus out. In terms of vaccines, that was also not really great at first. At the end of the day, though, now we have more vaccines almost than people willing to take them. The opposite problem, right? You've got people who are not wanting to be vaccinated, and the Prime Minister now saying, well, go get them. They're here. So I think the vaccination piece, at the end of the day, he's done okay because we have achieved a goal of having a vaccination rate that's one of the highest. I think we're 9th highest in the world. But, he'll get the credit for that, whether he deserves the credit or not. So
now, I checked you out on LinkedIn. You were something with Young Conservatives in your background? What was this?
I just got a gift here, cookies. It's a pie. Thank you, sweetie. This is what happens when your kids work. You're working from home and everyone else is. I'm sorry, Brian. I missed your question.
I was asking about your time with the Young Conservatives. What did you do with the Young Conservatives?
You're taking me back a ways. Yeah, I was with the Young Conservatives. They were then the Progressive Conservative Youth Federation back in the 90s mostly. Though I started in 84 as a young Tory when I was all of 14 years old. So yes, I ended up being national president of the PC Youth Federation when I was in my late 20s. And it was a great time to be a Tory and a young Tory because you first had the Mulroney years, and then you had the sort of leaner years, I would say, it was Jean Charest, but still an interesting time because conservatism was going through all these, the permutations and discussions with the Canadian Alliance and the reform before that. And so, it was an interesting time to be advancing conservative ideas. Ronald Reagan was in power in the U.S. before that, and then Bush. So you had a lot of positive vibes of conservatism from south of the border. Didn't always translate up here, but that's how I sort of cut my teeth in politics. And then I got into media and I depoliticized myself. Yeah.
And did you actually depoliticize yourself?
Oh yeah, I got rid of my membership card. I think I joined the party once to help a friend who was running for some campaign, just to sign up as someone to vote for him at the nomination. But apart from that brief interlude, I've not been a party member since I believe it's 1999 or thereabouts. Because I didn't feel it was, appropriate. I was a journalist. I was producing television, and I really wasn't, I didn't feel I felt it would compromise my integrity to be a party member when I was writing about politics and that kind of thing. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to go there because while I wasn't national president, I was very involved as well, not in the Young Conservatives, but in the Young Liberals. Surprise, surprise.
I was going to say the other side.
And
I forgive you.
my second cousin, who I got involved in politics for in 1972, was leader of the Ontario Liberal Party. And he wrote me an email on the weekend in regards to, his time, not when he was leader, but when he was actually treasurer of Ontario. And David Peterson's Liberals called an election early, and they were ahead in the polls. They thought they would be able to return a majority government. They and right after the announcement, the polls started going down. And they ended up losing to Bob Rae. And he said, people that don't remember history are bound to repeat it. What do you think? Is there a risk that this call backfires on the Liberals?
Yeah, there is a risk. And the risk could be less, I think, from the early call than from what happens now with the pandemic in particular. If the fourth wave takes on a lot of momentum and God forbid we're locked down again, that's going to sour a lot of people. It also makes the whole election makes it harder for ground games to happen because, how do you vote in a pandemic? It's not fully clear what if we can't go to the polls at all? Is it all mail-in ballots? What does that do to people's ability to vote and the party machine's ability to get people to vote? So there's that. I think also there's a sense, with what's happening in Afghanistan is utterly horrible. And there are calls for the prime minister to do what England's done, France has done, bring back parliament to deal with the state of emergency in a country where we spent over a decade fighting for the freedoms
and
that are now
lost lives,
eroded overnight. We've lost lives. So that issue, you remember Alan Kurdi and the famous photo of a little boy, Alan, lying down, face down on a beach. That was a horrible image of a greater crisis, humanitarian crisis, with the Kurds that really galvanized, I think, issues in the last election, or 2 elections ago rather, for Justin Trudeau, where people said, you know what, the Harper government's not managing the situation. They're not responding. The Liberals were going to respond. I wonder if this is going to have a similar tone. And right now it's too early to tell, but enough people are getting very upset about this, and the military community too.
Talking about the election call and what's going to happen with pundit Tasha Kheiriddin. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Tasha in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. A real honor for me. I've watched you on TV. I've read your columns. I've always been interested in what you've had to say. We've got Tasha Kheiriddin, who is a national president of the Young Conservatives at one point in time in the past, but more importantly, a principal today with Navigator Limited, national political columnist for Post Media. You write a couple times a week on that, often on Radio Canada as a political analyst and on CBC. we talked about the pandemic. What about, I think the issue that sort of took over the country in sort of May, June, July was residential schools. Mm-hmm. Is it going to come back during the election? Is it going to be an election issue? What are people going to say?
I think it will. I think the NDP is going to try and capitalize on the Liberals' failure to live up to some of their promises, their larger promises, even some smaller ones like boil water advisories and this kind of thing. They've met certain goals on that, but not all. The report on missing women and girls is also, a lot of the goals there haven't been achieved. So I think that, there's a certain dissatisfaction with the way the Liberals have failed to deal with big components of Indigenous people's agendas and the agenda they'd set for themselves. That said, I think that also, though, for the Conservatives, you flip to them, it's hard to say, well, we would have done a better job. I think, like I said, the NDP will be the ones who really will try and get votes on this. Justin Trudeau had brought the issue to the fore, and for that, he does deserve a lot of credit. It's an issue that did not have a lot of play. And if you cast your mind back to before the pandemic, I mean, what were we all doing in the 2 months before things shut down in March 2020? We had a huge rail blockade. The whole country was at a standstill. Supply chains were at a standstill because of what was happening with the Wet'suwet'en and the pipeline in the West. Justin Trudeau bought a pipeline, not that one, but he bought a pipeline. That's going to be an issue too, because how do you square the circle of environmental and Indigenous rights versus economic development with pipelines? Again, though, the Tories wouldn't have made a different choice. They're in favor of that. So I think you're going to see a battle on the progressive side of the ledger over these issues.
What about climate change and carbon taxes? Aaron O'Toole, surprised many with coming out with a support of carbon taxes.
Yep, he did. He does believe climate change is real. It's a good thing. Because the party didn't vote for that one and made headlines for all the wrong reasons. Yes, climate change is going to be an issue too. And with everything happening in British Columbia right now, people are really feeling the devastation of the effects of a hotter planet. And the wildfires there, you can think of other natural disasters that have happened across the country too, but that one's happening right now. So climate change is an issue. The Tories just released their platform today. I haven't delved into all their climate policies, but it's going to be debated. So, climate change, Indigenous issues, the economy, these are going to be, I think, the three top ones. And the pandemic, yes, but how it fits into all those. Interestingly, the Conservatives are talking a lot about inequality in the platform. They do say that, inequality is a big issue. We've got to deal with that. And that's a first. It's not language you usually see from the right, so to speak. And I think it's about time, because inequalities have been exacerbated by the pandemic and what we're living through. And if they hadn't dealt with that piece, I think they would really have positioned themselves in difficulty this time around.
You used to work for the Canadian Taxpayers Association or Federation.
You read a lot about me.
I did. Debt and deficits, one would think, would be a major issue. And in the last election, it was only Maxime Bernier that was really making noise, particularly in the leaders' debate about debt and deficit. And the Conservatives at the time, Andrew Scheer, almost didn't comment on it. And clearly people have felt some of the things that the federal government did during the last year were the right moves. But aren't people going to be worried about how we're going to pay back this debt and what the increase in taxes or printing money or central government easings aren't those going to be big issues? Shouldn't those be typical Conservative issues?
They should be Conservative issues. They will be Conservative issues, but the Conservatives are going to spend piles of money too. They just said, they're going to do also. In fact, some of the things they're going to do are a little loopy, I think. Pay half your restaurant bill for a month. What's with that? Okay, I love to dine out too on someone's dime, but not on the taxpayers. But anyway, yes, we should be very worried, because the solution to burgeoning debt is, it's one of two things: either restraint or taxes. And governments haven't really been showing an appetite for restraint, even the Conservatives. So that means higher taxes. And the NDP's already come out with it in their platform. They'd like to have a 1% wealth tax. People have over $10 million, for example. There's been talk also, didn't succeed, I think, at the Liberal convention, but taxing capital gains on primary residences, which we don't do currently. There's a lot of stuff in the hopper. So yeah, I think a lot of people should be really nervous. But it's not something that I think is getting the attention that necessarily should. I think deficits and debt are a big issue, but it has fallen off the radar generally. I think not just during the pandemic, but even before, in terms of a hot issue that people care much about.
So the radio station that we're broadcasting the show on is in Peel in the 905, and Andrew Scheer's big strategy in the last election was to pick up a couple of seats in the 905. In Peel, he won one seat in Caledon and nothing in Brampton or Mississauga. Lost former Minister of Transportation lost in Milton, which was a seat that they had in Halton. They didn't win any seats in Halton. In York, I can't remember, but I think they only won one or two seats. And he's from the 905, Aaron O'Toole, the leader of the Conservative Party. And one of his pitches to the leadership was that he thought that he could regain some seats in the 905. And some people think without the 905 or some portion of the 905, you can't win. When Harper won a minority, he won half the seats in Mississauga. When Harper won a majority, he won all the seats in Mississauga. What do you think is going to happen? Can Aaron O'Toole get suburbanites, 905, which, Mississauga is a good example. 57% of people in Mississauga have lived in Canada for less than 10 years. So very ethnic, very immigrant. Can he appeal to those people?
He better find a way, because to your point, without those seats, it'll be very hard for the Conservatives to form a government. I mean, right now people aren't even talking about that. They're saying Liberal majority or minority, but for the Conservatives, they need to get those seats back. And one of the ways they did it in 2011 was a few of them was coming up the middle, because the NDP was very strong under Jack Layton, split off some of the progressive vote from the Liberals, and the result was in certain seats, the Conservatives reap the benefit of that. So divide and conquer. I don't know if that's going to happen again this time, but it could happen a bit, because Jagmeet Singh is, I think, like I said earlier, one of the people to watch and one of the wild cards here for the dissatisfied progressive voter who doesn't think the government's performed. They have that option. He's very charismatic, et cetera. I think the battle for the NDP, though, too, will be in downtown Toronto, perhaps more than suburban. So O'Toole has to appeal. He has to offer something to those voters. The election platform released today already has a piece about childcare, that the Conservatives are saying, we're going to give you a choice in childcare as opposed to spending the billions of dollars Justin Trudeau wants to do. We are going to give you money directly to families. I think you get $6,000 if you have 30,000 income or less. It's targeting low income, targeting some of the folks you're talking about who will be essential workers, who are new Canadians. Their kids need childcare. What do they do? So he's looking at that. Is that going to be enough? I don't know. But definitely this focus on the family unit and that kind of thing is something that they're looking at. But I mean, Jason Kenney, when he was immigration minister under Stephen Harper, he went to every single event, cultural communities as they were called then, every dinner, everything, to try and get new Canadians excited about conservatism, and it didn't last. And I think that is a big failure for Conservatives. You've got to find common ground with new Canadians, because they are the future voters, not just in the 905, but for all urban centers in Canada.
But it was associated not with the Conservative Party. It was associated with Jason Kenney. They came to see him, and Patrick Brown did the same thing. Patrick Brown did a great job, and still is well connected with those ethnic communities. But it's a personal connection. It's not a party connection.
Well, exactly. It didn't translate. And that's what we saw the next time around. It evaporated, basically. So the Conservatives have to find a bigger way than just the guy. They have to find actual policies. And I think they can. I think there's a certain, free enterprise, hard work. It's always hard. My parents were immigrants to this country. They didn't expect anything. They worked really hard. A lot of Canadians, the same thing. New Canadians come here and they know it's not an easy go very often. So that sense of I guess, pulling yourself up and putting your family, putting your kids, getting them a good education, all those things are valuable Conservative values of saying, hey, this is what we respect. We want to encourage that. So I think that there is a commonality, but it hasn't been found. And when you look at, the sort of anti-mask, the stuff that the failure of the provincial Conservative government to give essential workers sick days, for example, those kinds of things, people will attach them to O'Toole, even if they weren't his thing.
Yeah,
they will attach that, and that's a problem for them.
Okay, I understand you've got a hard stop and you got to go, but I got to ask you, what about this cover that shows that Aaron O'Toole is in incredible shape, and he's either got the body of a bodybuilder or he somehow photoshopped the best body a guy could ever want?
You've got to put this image up. You're going to edit this piece here, because that is just, my colleagues and I we were looking at this morning going, what is this? I recall Stockwell Day in 2000, riding a jet ski. And that image, that didn't work then. I don't know why this is here now. I get that they want to show that he's in shape, and good for him. Like, congratulations on doing that. I certainly didn't do that during the pandemic myself, but hey, great. I don't know. I don't think that's going to solve their problem. That's not going to make people trust you, right? The trust is the issue, not how buff you are.
So what's going to happen?
Well, what's going to happen?
An issue?
Well, it's become an issue today for the chattering class. People are kind of mocking it. It's the cover of their platform. They're kind of laughing and saying, what is this? Is the average Canadian going to be looking at this? Probably not. So this is the thing to remember too. A lot of the conversation happening in the echo chambers is not what the average voter's looking at. That's what they have to keep their eye on too, and not be distracted. There it is.
So what do you think? Who's going to win the election in September?
Wow. Okay. Well, you're asking the big question, Brian. It's the second day. I think that right now the money is on a Liberal government of some kind, whether majority or minority. If the Conservatives, if for any reason, and I say this, Justin Trudeau screws up big time, and you get another situation like you did with blackface. You get another situation where he misspeaks or says something really offensive or anything like that. He does have a bit of foot and mouth disease. It's his to lose. So if he doesn't do that, I think it'll be very hard to overcome, the sort of incumbent effect and what we've lived through the pandemic and his man and all these. I think people will give him another chance to keep going. If he makes a mistake, the Conservatives have to be ready to step into the breach. But then if they win, would they get more of a minority? And if so, who do they dance with? The Bloc Québécois? Be a very strange government. So my money is still probably on the Liberals, at this point, but I won't make a hard and fast prediction.
Tasha Kheiriddin, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
Stay with us. We're going to come back with some more on the election in just a minute.